The Freedom House, in its most recent report, said press freedom is in a downward spiral around the world, a symptom of a global decline in democracy. In the Philippines, 16 journalists have been killed since populist President Rodrigo Duterte took office in 2016. Mr. Duterte has attacked critical journalists and media companies. In a landmark case, high-profile journalist Maria Ressa was convicted of cyber libel. Ressa's media company Rappler has also been facing court cases and investigations. The Philippine government has also shut down the country's biggest broadcaster, leaving the fate of the company's 11,000 employees in limbo in the middle of a pandemic.
Good day, everyone. I'm Makoi Popioco. I'm a Filipino journalist and a fellow of the World Movement for Democracy. In the previous episode, we spoke with two Filipino journalists whose media companies have drawn the ire of President Rodrigo Duterte due to their critical reporting. We have them back, Lian Buan of Rappler and Mike Navallo of ABS-CBN News. In the previous episode, we talked about Maria Ressa, Rappler's cases, and ABS-CBN shutdown. Now in this episode, we will focus on other forms of harassment that journalists have been experiencing online. What do you think is the effect of trolls on public discourse?
I'm gonna answer this from the perspective of a justice beat reporter. It's a really complicated beat, and to some extent, lawyers do really have the monopoly of what the law says. So it's very easy to twist, come up with a narrative that will suit their propaganda, and all the supporters and detractors will just have a feast. Like, for example, the anti-terror law. When it was being deliberated by Congress, lawyers supportive of the president said that they bannered this caveat under Section 4. They said that, it's very clear that dissent is not part of terror. But they conveniently leave out that sentence is not finished. It says, dissent is not part of terror if it doesn't have an intent to cause harm or risk. And intent is very subjective, and it has actually shifted the burden of proof. When the state or state instrumentality, state agents support that narrative, then it's hard to really fix the public discourse. What's bizarre is when the bloggers start the conspiracy theory and then the government picks up on it. That's really bizarre because it's like the bloggers dictating what the government will say, and then you see it end up in official proceedings.
So you're talking about the pro-Duterte bloggers, right?
Yes.
That we also meet on field who get to cover the same events that we go to. We've been discussing about the two types of feedback that we're getting online. So we get feedback from real people, but we also get comments from what appears to be fake accounts.
For some supporters, no matter who says it, as long as it's in favor of, say, the president, they'll take it at face value. I mean, talk about the legal case, and the one talking about it is a blogger who's not even a lawyer, and yet they will embrace that just because it suits their narrative. So really, the challenge here is, how do you go against that? How do you go against this echo chamber, so to speak? My theory is that one of the reasons why these bloggers and influencers on social media are influential right now is because the attacks against traditional media have been unchallenged and unanswered since 2016. Those attacks continued during the president's tenure, especially when the war on drugs started. Then those who are criticizing are being attacked, and then it continued.
We're not just talking about hateful comments, but we're also talking about disinformation or the deliberate sowing of lies on social media. Do you think what happens online, let's say this false bandwagon effect that trolling creates, do you think this shapes political views in person? I mean, with your experience talking to ordinary Filipinos, have you observed any reluctance or deliberate refusal to speak up due to fears of being attacked online?
Yes, I think that this has a huge effect because when you look at conversations on the streets, for instance, about the ABS-CBN shutdown, some people would tend to cite some video they found on YouTube explaining this and that. If you watch the Senate hearing, those questions have already been answered. Unfortunately, in that particular interview that you're citing, it was not brought up. It was not mentioned at all. And so a huge part of the success of the disinformation campaign comes from the fact that people who actually tend to agree with it, tend to accept it, will go without questioning it and without looking at who's the source. Is he credible? I mean, if you look at those who believe in social media, they'll just cite, I saw it on Facebook, I saw it on YouTube, without criticizing who's putting out this information.
To your first question, if it has shaped political views, definitely, because I've seen it very close to home. It's your friends, your own family, your teachers who are supposed to know you, who have raised you and taught you the values that you hold dear, and suddenly they wake up in 2016 having their beloved president elected, and suddenly you're a liar, suddenly you're a paid hack, and you just want to tell them, we know each other, you know me, I'm not a paid hack, why would you believe that? Very recently, I did a story on how the National Bureau of Investigation sent subpoenas to several individuals nationwide because of a request from Senator Bongos, the longtime presidential aide, the aide of President Duterte. They were subpoenas precisely because they were outspoken and Senator Go didn't like what they were saying online, but none of them wanted to go on record for that story, and I understand that. I didn't force them to be quoted by their names, just all anonymous. Because being trolled by keyboard warriors is difficult already. It's so much difficult to be trolled by the government, to be trolled by your NBI, who's supposed to protect you. With the threat of prosecution, it's tough. So if fierce and critical and outspoken people, such as the subjects of the subpoena, were suddenly cowed into silence, at least for this aspect, then you can just imagine the effect on others. Then no one will really speak up anymore.
We see that there's been a pattern. You see that it looks organized. And trolling has been advancing crystal clear political agenda. I think that's the main point that I'm driving at.
I think it's well documented that we have heard before, we have seen reports about supposedly the government funding a troll farm to advance its agenda. I mean, there's no confirmation from the government, but you do have to ask, if this were true, why are we spending so much on advancing propaganda online instead of, say, addressing the pandemic? There's a lot to be said about that, but of course, with a caveat that nobody has come forward to say that this is really happening with all the proof needed to prove this in court and seek accountability from those behind it. But it's really frightening what this is doing to our country, because it's very divisive. And what it does is it really stifles dissent, because you get clobbered if you say something that's against the government.
Right, that's a great point. I'm not saying anything here, but I'd like to put this question out here. Who's paying them? I think that's the main concern here. If they're being paid using taxpayers' money, that makes it more concerning.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, Makoi. Like, I think we should keep a focusing on the top tier. Who's organizing this? It's very easy to search and find these trolls, whether they're trolls or real people. And it's very easy to pick on them, wage a fight with them. But I think at the end of the day, they're victims also, because probably they need the money, or second, they really do sincerely believe in what they're being fed because of several factors, like a lack of education, lack of information. So they're victims. I think we should leave them alone. I think we should really focus on the top tier, like which are the agencies behind this? Who are the PR experts surrounding this? It's the government behind this. So I'd like also to get this opportunity to point out that, remember when Facebook accounts were being cloned 2 months ago? The Department of Justice Office of the Cybercrime said they were going to investigate Facebook cloning, and I asked them, are you going to investigate government instrumentalities? Are you going to investigate bloggers allied with the government, just to see if there's some connection? We didn't get a categorical answer, but I think that because there's already an investigation to that effect, I think we should keep the pressure on that investigation.
With the rise of populist leaders around the world, more and more journalists have been working under repressive regimes and in dangerous circumstances. To better protect journalists and uphold press freedom, what changes do you hope to see soon?
There's a proposal to regulate social media platforms with respect to anti-terror law or with respect to any other goal. I don't agree with that. But at the same time, I hope that social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube realize that they should have a gatekeeping function. And so now Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and other social media platforms should also realize that they should perform this role, and they cannot just let any content on the basis of freedom of expression just spread misinformation, disinformation on their platform, because they have a responsibility to the truth. So I hope they realize that, and not any government imposing any form of regulation on them. But in a way, like media, self-regulation, because that's how it should go.
I sincerely hope that we get to see more media literacy initiatives in the country. I know that demanding that from the government is quite huge of a task, but I'm hoping that more nonprofit would engage in doing media literacy initiatives in the country. I sincerely hope that more Filipinos will begin to challenge every piece of information that they get online. And I hope that in the near future, we journalists get to work in an ecosystem, an information ecosystem where social media users are more informed and aware that they can be subject to cognitive and behavioral manipulation.
For one, I hope to see ABS-CBN back on air as soon as humanly possible. I think that the Filipino people could use that collective sense of triumph. To your more existential question of what change do I want to see to be able to uphold press freedom, I'm gonna keep it simple. I think our best chance is really the people. It's really the audience. So just if they patronize good journalism, they read quality journalism, watch it, help it, listen to it, help sustain the business that lets us do this. I think we will be able, all of us will be able to show the leaders that we still have your trust. And that's what we need. Because these politicians ask for your vote every 3 years or 6 years. So if you tell them, if you show them that you trust us and you believe us, then that is a powerful thing. And in return, we're going to commit that we will do our best to give you the most relevant, the most useful, the most timely, but also the most critical and scrutinizing way of delivering you information that you need to be able to make your decisions.
Thank you, Lian and Mike. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Multiple studies have shown that press freedom is in alarming decline around the world. I'd like to leave you with this question. Whether you are a journalist, an aspiring one, or a media consumer, what can you do to prevent this from happening? I'm Makoi Popioco. Thank you for joining us.